My supervisor deleted my project right before the deadline, then boss called me personally. The cursor blinked mockingly at me as I stared at the screen, my eyes burning from 3 straight hours of debugging code. The office was tomb silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant whir of the building's ventilation system. At 3:17 a.m., I was the only soul left in Sterling Financial's gleaming downtown headquarters, surrounded by empty energy drink cans and crumpled post-it notes covered in my increasingly frantic handwriting. My name is Jada Monroe, and I'm what they call a mid-level data analyst, though after tonight, I hoped that title would finally change. For the past 93 days, I'd been living and breathing this project, a predictive algorithm that could revolutionize how our fintech company assessed loan defaults. It wasn't just another model pulled from a textbook. This was my baby, built from scratch, trained on patterns I discovered in thousands of hours of data that everyone else had overlooked. The algorithm could predict default probability with 94.7% accuracy, nearly 15 percentage points higher than our current system. In the cutthroat world of financial technology, that difference meant millions in saved losses and a competitive edge that could reshape our entire market position. I flexed my fingers, cracking knuckles that had been typing almost nonstop since 6 p.m. The quarterly review presentation was due in exactly 5 hours and 37 minutes. Not that I was counting. Just hit save and upload, I whispered to myself, a mantra I'd been repeating for the last 20 minutes. My finger hovered over the mouse button. This moment felt monumental, like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing that jumping would either give me wings or send me crashing. The past 3 months had been a nightmare of bureaucratic sabotage disguised as constructive feedback. My supervisor, Trevor Blackstone, had a gift for finding ways to delay my progress without leaving fingerprints. "Let's circle back on this," he'd say during meetings, his perfectly practiced smile never wavering. "I think we need more data validation. Or, have you considered running this by the compliance team first?" Each suggestion came wrapped in corporate speak that sounded reasonable in front of others, but felt like quicksand beneath my feet. Every week, another hoop to jump through. Every revision, another reason to push back my timeline. Trevor had the uncanny ability to ask for changes that would take days to implement, then disappear for meetings when I needed clarification. But tonight was different. Tonight, I was finally ready. I double-clicked the upload folder, watching as my masterpiece, all 847 pages of documentation, code, and analysis, prepared to sync to the company's shared drive. The progress bar crawled forward. 15%, 34%, 67%. That's when it happened. The screen flickered. Not the usual Windows glitch or a momentary power surge. This was different, a strange, almost liquid distortion that made the pixels seem to melt and reform. For a split second, I could swear I saw my reflection in the monitor, but twisted, like looking into a funhouse mirror. "What the hell?" I muttered, blinking hard. Maybe I was more exhausted than I thought. The progress bar jumped to 89%, then 95%. My heart hammered against my ribs. Almost there. Almost. The screen went black. Not the blue screen of death. Not a system crash message. Just pure, unforgiving darkness, like someone had reached into my computer and stolen the light itself. I frantically pressed keys, moved the mouse, even tried the old percussive maintenance technique of tapping the side of the monitor. Nothing. The machine had died at the worst possible moment, like a car breaking down in the middle of a desert highway. My hands shook as I held down the power button, forcing a restart. The familiar Windows logo appeared, giving me a brief moment of hope. I logged back in, my fingers flying across the keyboard as I navigated to the shared drive folder where my project should have been automatically saved. Empty. The folder was completely, impossibly empty. I checked my recent files. Nothing. I searched for any document containing my project's keywords. 0 results. It was as if the last 3 months of my life had been erased from existence. My phone buzzed with a text message. Trevor's name appeared on the screen, which was strange because he'd never texted me this late before. Or early, depending on how you looked at it. Strange. Must be a sync issue. These servers have been acting up lately. Hope you have a backup. Smiling face with smiling eyes. The smiley face felt like a slap across my digital cheek. How did he know about the sync issue? How did he know I was having problems? I hadn't told anyone I was working late, and our employee badge system didn't track after-hours access in real time. Unless he'd been monitoring me. I stared at the message, reading it over and over again. The words seemed innocent enough, but something about the tone felt wrong. Too casual. Too perfectly timed. Like he'd been waiting for exactly this moment to reach out with his helpful concern. My exhausted brain started connecting dots that might not have been there. Trevor's constant delays. His mysterious unavailability whenever I needed urgent approvals. The way he always seemed to know just a little too much about my progress, even when I hadn't updated him. I took a screenshot of his message, then scrolled through our previous conversations. Most were standard work communications, but I noticed a pattern I'd missed before. Every time I'd mentioned hitting a breakthrough or being close to completion, he'd respond within minutes with a new requirement or suggestion that would set me back days. The office suddenly felt colder, despite the building's consistent climate control. I wrapped my cardigan tighter around my shoulders and tried to think rationally. Maybe it really was just a sync issue. Maybe the timing was coincidental. Maybe I was paranoid from too much caffeine and not enough sleep. But as I sat alone in that fluorescent-lit tomb of corporate ambition, surrounded by the digital graveyard where my life's work had just vanished, I couldn't shake the feeling that something much bigger was happening. Something that had nothing to do with server glitches or innocent timing. I pulled out my laptop bag and checked the side pocket where I always kept my personal backup drive. Thank God for old habits. I might be paranoid, but I wasn't stupid. Every significant milestone of this project existed on that little silver stick, completely separate from the company's network. Trevor's message glowed on my phone screen like a neon warning sign. I screenshot it again, then forwarded it to my personal email account. If something fishy was happening, I was going to document every second of it. The building's security guard made his rounds, his footsteps echoing through the empty corridors. I waved at him through the glass partition, trying to look normal despite the chaos spinning through my mind. He nodded and continued on his path, leaving me alone with my suspicions and the growing certainty that tomorrow was going to be a very interesting day. As I packed up my things and prepared to head home for a few hours of restless sleep, I couldn't help but wonder, was I about to discover that corporate sabotage was real, or was I just an exhausted analyst whose paranoia was getting the better of her? Either way, I had a feeling I was about to find out. 4 hours of fitful sleep later, I was back at my desk with a double espresso and a knot in my stomach that felt like it could anchor a ship. The morning sunlight streaming through Sterling Financial's floor-to-ceiling windows should have been comforting, but instead it felt like a spotlight illuminating my potential humiliation. I logged into my computer with trembling fingers, clinging to the desperate hope that my project would somehow materialize like a digital resurrection. Maybe last night had been a nightmare. Maybe exhaustion had made me hallucinate the whole thing. The shared drive folder opened. Still empty. My heart sank into my shoes, but I wasn't ready to give up. I navigated to the backup folder that automatically saved versions of all shared documents. Empty. The change logs that tracked every edit and revision?
Gone.
The collaborative workspace where I'd stored research notes and data sources? Wiped clean. It was like someone had taken an eraser to my professional existence. Morning, Jada. Trevor's voice boomed across the office space with the artificial cheerfulness of a game show host. He approached my desk carrying a steaming mug that read, "World's Best Boss," a gift from last year's Secret Santa that nobody had the heart to tell him was meant ironically. "Trevor, we need to talk." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "My project files are completely gone. Everything." He perched on the edge of my desk, his expression shifting to one of exaggerated concern. "Oh no, really? The whole thing?" He clicked his tongue sympathetically. "These server issues have been a nightmare lately. I've been telling IT about the reliability problems for months. But you texted me at 3 a.m. about a sync issue. How did you know I was having problems?" Trevor's pause lasted exactly 1 second too long. Long enough for me to notice, short enough for him to pretend it never happened. "Oh, that? I got an automated alert about server instability. I figured since you were working so hard on the quarterly presentation, you might be affected. Automated alert at 3:17 a.m. for a specific sync issue affecting only my files.
Right.
I need to talk to IT immediately, I said, already reaching for my phone. Great idea. Let me walk you down there. The IT department occupied the building's basement level, a fluorescent-lit maze of servers, and the eternal smell of coffee mixed with electronics. Marcus Chun, the lead systems administrator, looked up from his computer with a weary expression of someone who'd already fielded 12. Have you tried turning it off and on again calls before 9 a.m.? Jada, what can I do for you? Marcus had always been friendly, which made what happened next even more bizarre. I need help recovering some files. My entire quarterly project disappeared last night during an upload. Marcus frowned and pulled up what looked like a database on his screen. His fingers flew across the keyboard as he searched various systems. After 5 minutes of clicking and typing, he turned back to me with genuine confusion. That's weird. I'm not showing any record of your project files ever existing in our system. No uploads, no saves, no access logs. It's like they were never there. That's impossible. I've been working on this for 3 months. I've been saving to the shared drive regularly. I'm sure you have, but our servers don't lie. If there's no digital footprint, then technically, from our system's perspective, those files never existed. Trevor stepped forward, placing what I'm sure he thought was a comforting hand on my shoulder. This is so frustrating for you, Jada. But maybe this is a sign that we should take a step back and reassess the whole approach. The casual way he dismissed 3 months of my life made something snap inside me. Reassess? Trevor, this project was my contribution to the quarterly review. It's due in 6 hours. Well, he said, spreading his hands in a gesture of helpless sympathy, maybe you forgot to save properly? It happens to the best of us. The pressure of big projects can make us think we've done things we haven't actually done. The suggestion hit me like a physical blow. Forgot to save? I'd been saving obsessively, creating backup after backup. But standing there in that basement office, surrounded by blinking servers and the pitying looks of IT staff, I felt my confidence begin to crumble. Maybe I had imagined saving when I hadn't. Maybe the stress had affected my memory. Maybe...
No.
Stop. I took a deep breath and forced myself to think clearly. I might doubt my memory, but I trusted my habits. And one habit I'd maintained religiously throughout this entire project was keeping a personal backup on my home computer. Can you print me a report of all server activity for my user account over the past 24 hours? I asked Marcus. Sure thing. He clicked a few more keys and sent something to the printer. Though, like I said, there's not much to see. The printed report confirmed his words. No record of any significant file activity on my account. According to Sterling Financial's digital records, I'd spent last night doing absolutely nothing. Trevor glanced at his watch. Well, this has been illuminating, but I should prep for the quarterly meeting. Jada, why don't you take the day to recover from this setback? Maybe start fresh on a new project next week. As he walked away, I caught something in his reflection in the glass partition, the briefest flash of what looked like satisfaction. It disappeared so quickly I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. Almost. But that tiny glimpse of smugness lit a fire in my chest. I folded the IT report and slipped it into my purse alongside the screenshot of Trevor's suspiciously timed text message. If someone was playing games with my career, I was about to become a very dedicated player myself. The truth was waiting for me at home, stored safely on a drive that Sterling Financial servers had never touched. The quarterly review meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. in the executive boardroom, a gleaming monument to corporate success with its mahogany table that could seat 20 and windows overlooking the city skyline. I arrived early, clutching a coffee that had gone cold an hour ago, my stomach churning with a mixture of dread and anticipation. I'd spent my lunch break at home, confirming what I already knew. My personal backup drive contained every single file, every line of code, every breakthrough moment of my predictive algorithm. The relief had been overwhelming, but it raised even more disturbing questions. How could files simply vanish from a professional server system while leaving no trace? The boardroom gradually filled with sterling financials key players. CEO Olivia Grant took her seat at the head of the table, her silver hair pulled back in a sharp bun that matched her no-nonsense reputation. Department heads shuffled papers and adjusted their ties, the usual pre-meeting ritual of corporate theater. Trevor entered with unusual fanfare, wheeling in a presentation cart loaded with printed materials and what looked like a small champagne bottle. Behind him trailed Marcus Rivera, a junior analyst who'd been hired just 8 months ago. Marcus looked nervous, constantly adjusting his glasses and wiping his palms on his pants. "Ladies and gentlemen," Trevor announced with the confidence of a circus ringmaster, "I'm thrilled to present what I believe will be a game-changing addition to our risk assessment capabilities." My blood turned to ice water. Trevor clicked to his first slide, Revolutionary Machine Learning Framework for Default Prediction. The subtitle read, "Developed by Marcus Rivera, Junior Data Analyst." The room erupted in polite applause while I sat frozen, watching my life's work unfold before my eyes like a nightmare in PowerPoint format. The presentation design was different. Trevor had changed the color scheme from my preferred blues and grays to a bold red and black theme. The fonts were different too, switched from my standard Calibri to something more dramatic. But the content, oh God, the content was mine. As you can see, Trevor continued, gesturing toward a flowchart that I'd spent weeks perfecting, Marcus has developed an innovative approach that combines traditional regression analysis with advanced neural network processing. Marcus stood up shakily, clearing his throat. The algorithm analyzes 17 different variables, including. He launched into an explanation using the exact same technical language I'd crafted during countless late-night sessions. The same unique terminology. The same specific examples. I watched in stunned horror as he described the data pre-processing steps I'd innovated, the feature engineering techniques I'd discovered through trial and error, even the validation methodology I'd developed to ensure accuracy. He stumbled occasionally, clearly reading from notes, but the core concepts were unmistakably mine. The most impressive aspect, Trevor interjected, is the accuracy rate. Marcus, would you like to share those numbers? 94.7% accuracy in default prediction, Marcus said, his voice gaining confidence. That's a 14.8 percentage point improvement over our current system. The exact numbers, down to the decimal point. Olivia Grant leaned forward, her eyes sharp with interest. That's remarkable, Marcus. How long did this take you to develop? About 3 months of intensive work, he replied, and I felt something inside me break. I've been putting in a lot of late nights, really diving deep into the data patterns that others might have missed. The phrase hit me like a physical blow because I'd used those exact words in my project summary, a summary that Marcus had asked to peek at just 2 weeks ago during a casual conversation by the coffee machine. He'd said he was curious about advanced analytics techniques and wondered if I could share some insights about my approach. I'd been flattered by his interest. I'd even sent him a few sample code snippets to help with his own smaller projects, never imagining he was conducting reconnaissance for a heist. Trevor clicked to the next slide, showing a complex diagram of the algorithm's decision tree structure. Every branch, every decision point, every optimization was identical to my design. The only differences were cosmetic, different colors, slightly adjusted spacing, a few renamed variables that didn't change the underlying logic. The beauty of this system, Marcus continued, warming to his topic, is how it handles edge cases that traditional models miss. For instance, the algorithm identifies subtle patterns in payment timing that correlate with future default risk in ways that aren't immediately obvious. I gripped the edge of the table so hard my knuckles went white. That insight about payment timing patterns had taken me 6 weeks to discover, buried in data that I'd analyzed during countless sleepless nights. It was my breakthrough moment, the realization that had transformed my good algorithm into a great one. As the presentation continued, I cataloged every stolen piece, the risk-weighting methodology I developed after reading 12 research papers, the data visualization approach I'd crafted after experimenting with 7 different techniques, even the specific way I'd structure the output reports for maximum executive readability. They hadn't just stolen my work, they'd stolen my voice, my insights, my intellectual DNA. Every creative decision, every innovative solution, every moment of genuine discovery had been repackaged and attributed to someone else. The final slide showed projected financial benefits, estimated annual savings of $2.3 million in reduced default losses. Another number pulled directly from my analysis. The room buzzed with excitement. Department heads nodded approvingly. Olivia Grant smiled, a rare sight that usually preceded promotions and bonuses. "Outstanding work, Marcus," she said. "This is exactly the kind of innovation that keeps Sterling Financial ahead of the competition. Trevor, you should be proud of developing this talent." Trevor basked in the reflected glory while Marcus flushed with what I could only assume was a mixture of pride and guilt. As the meeting wound down and congratulations flowed freely, I sat in my chair like a ghost watching her own funeral. They hadn't just erased my project from the servers. They'd erased me from my own creation, leaving behind a hollow shell wearing someone else's name. The champagne Trevor had brought was uncorked with a celebratory pop that sounded like the final nail in my professional coffin. But as I sat there, surrounded by the thieves who'd stolen my genius and dressed it up as their own, one thought burned brighter than my rage. They might have taken my work, but they hadn't taken my proof. And I was about to remind them that in the digital age, the truth always leaves fingerprints. I drove home in a haze of fury and determination, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. The afternoon traffic crawled through downtown, giving me too much time to replay every stolen phrase, every hijacked insight from the meeting. But beneath the rage, a calculating part of my mind was already working, cataloging evidence and planning my counterattack. My apartment felt different when I walked through the door, no longer just a place to sleep between work sessions, but a war room where I was about to fight for my professional life. I kicked off my heels, tied my hair back, and opened my laptop with the focused intensity of a surgeon preparing for a critical operation. The private folder labeled algorithm_project_personal sat exactly where I'd left it on my desktop. I clicked it open, and there it was, my entire intellectual legacy, preserved in digital amber. But tonight, I wasn't just looking at my work, I was building an unshakable case. First, the metadata. I right-clicked on each file and examined the properties, creation dates, modification timestamps, file sizes. Every document told a story of my development process, stretching back 94 days to my very first exploratory analysis. The timestamps painted a clear picture of my working patterns, late nights, weekend sessions, the gradual evolution of ideas over months of dedicated effort. The earliest file was dated 3 weeks before Marcus had even been assigned to the analytics department. I created a spreadsheet to document everything systematically. File name, creation date, last modification, key contents. The pattern was irrefutable, a steady progression from basic concepts to sophisticated implementation, with each file building logically on the previous work. But metadata could be faked by someone with technical skills. I needed something more personal, more impossible to replicate. That's when I remembered the email drafts. Throughout the project, I developed a habit of composing detailed emails to myself, summarizing each day's breakthroughs and challenges. It was part journal, part documentation, a way to process complex ideas by explaining them in simple language. I'd save these drafts in my personal email account, never intending to send them, just using the familiar format to organize my thoughts. I logged into my Gmail and searched for algorithm draft. Dozens of unsent emails appeared, each one a snapshot of my intellectual journey. The language was casual, unguarded, the way someone talks to herself when no one else is listening. Figured out the weighting issue today. The trick is to normalize the payment timing data before applying the risk coefficients, not after. Obvious in hindsight, but took me 3 days of headbanging to see it. That insight about payment timing, the same one Marcus had presented as his own brilliant discovery, was documented in a draft email dated 6 weeks ago, complete with my excited rambling about the breakthrough. Another draft from 5 weeks back. The edge case handling is finally working. Turns out the key is recognizing that some patterns only emerge in the negative space. What customers don't do is just as important as what they do. This could be huge. Marcus had used almost identical language in the meeting, describing how the algorithm identifies subtle patterns that aren't immediately obvious. But my email draft proved I'd articulated this concept weeks before he'd even asked to peek at my work. I kept searching, building a chronological narrative of innovation. Each email draft was timestamped and preserved in Google servers, completely outside Sterling Financial's network and impossible for Trevor or Marcus to have known about, much less manipulated. Then I found something even better. Buried in my video folder was a file I'd completely forgotten about, practice_presentation_V2 and P4. 3 weeks ago, in preparation for what I'd hoped would be my moment of triumph, I'd recorded myself delivering a practice run of my presentation. I'd wanted to work on my delivery, identify awkward phrasing, and build confidence for the big moment. I clicked play and watched my earlier self appear on screen, standing in my living room with a laptop propped on my coffee table. The timestamp in the corner showed the date clearly, and my voice filled the room with explanations that now sounded eerily familiar. The beauty of this approach is how it handles edge cases that traditional models miss, my recorded voice said. For instance, the algorithm identifies subtle patterns in payment timing that correlate with future default risk in ways that aren't immediately obvious. Word for word, phrase for phrase. Even my inflection and emphasis were identical to what Marcus had delivered in the boardroom. I paused the video, my heart pounding with vindication. This wasn't just evidence, this was a smoking gun. You can steal someone's work, but you can't steal their personal speaking patterns, their unique way of explaining complex concepts, their individual intellectual voice. The video continued for 12 minutes, covering every major aspect of the algorithm in my own words, using my own examples, delivered with my own passion for the work. It was like watching my professional ghost haunting the present. But I needed more than just proof of theft. I needed someone who would listen, someone with the power to do something about it. Most of my colleagues would probably just offer sympathy and suggest I learn from the experience. HR would likely side with management to avoid complications. Then I remembered something Olivia Grant had said at the company diversity event 6 months ago. I'd been presenting a smaller analysis to a mixed group of employees, and afterward, she'd approached me with genuine interest in my work. "You have a gift for making complex data tell clear stories," she'd said. "That's rarer than you might think. If you ever develop something truly groundbreaking, don't let it get buried in bureaucracy. Send me something real if they ever try to bury your brilliance." At the time, I'd thought it was just polite executive encouragement. Now it felt like prophecy. I opened a new email and began typing. The subject line was simple: evidence of intellectual property theft, urgent review requested. I attached the practice video, key email drafts, and a detailed timeline with metadata. Then I wrote a concise but comprehensive explanation of what had happened, focusing on facts rather than emotions, letting the evidence speak for itself. My finger hovered over the send button. Once I pressed it, there would be no going back. This would either restore my professional reputation or destroy it completely if Olivia decided to side with Trevor and Marcus. But as I looked around my apartment, at the coffee-stained notebooks filled with algorithm sketches, the printouts covered with my handwritten optimizations, the whiteboard still showing my decision tree diagrams, I knew I had no choice. They had stolen my work, but they hadn't stolen my courage. I hit send and leaned back in my chair, feeling simultaneously exhausted and electrified. The evidence was now in the hands of someone who might actually care about the truth. All I could do was wait and hope that justice still existed in the corporate world. My phone sat silent on the desk, but I could almost feel it humming with potential energy, waiting to deliver news that would either vindicate me or confirm that theft was just another acceptable business practice. Either way, I was about to find out what happened when truth collided with power. The call came at 7:43 a.m., 3 days later, just as I was staring into my coffee mug and wondering if I'd made a career-ending mistake. I'd spent 72 hours in a strange limbo, going through the motions at work while Trevor and Marcus basked in their stolen glory. The algorithm, my algorithm, was already being fast-tracked for implementation, with Marcus being praised in company-wide emails as a rising star and innovative thinker. My phone's shrill ring cut through the morning silence like a fire alarm. Olivia Grant's name appeared on the screen, and my heart immediately started hammering against my ribs. Jada? Her voice was crisp and direct, the tone of someone who didn't waste time on small talk. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course. My voice came out steadier than I felt. I'm holding a document in my hands right now. It's a printed presentation about a predictive algorithm for default analysis. The cover page shows Marcus Rivera as the author, but there's something interesting in the fine print. I gripped the phone tighter, afraid to breathe. At the bottom of each page, there's a tiny footer that says JM_V3. The document properties show it was created from a template called Jada_Monroe_final_algorithm_presentation. Would you happen to know anything about this? The world seemed to tilt sideways. Where did you find that? That's the fascinating part. I was in the boardroom this morning for an early meeting with our legal team about patent applications. Apparently, Trevor wants to fast-track intellectual property protection for this revolutionary algorithm. I found this document sitting on the printer tray, apparently left behind from yesterday's preparation session. My mind raced. Marcus must have printed my original presentation to use as a reference while creating his plagiarized version. In his nervousness and inexperience, he'd forgotten to remove the identifying information embedded in the document properties, the digital DNA that proved the file's true parentage. Jada, I'm going to ask you directly. Is JM you? And is this algorithm your work? The moment felt suspended in time, like standing at the edge of a cliff with the choice to either step back to safety or leap into the unknown. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd dreamed of achieving, hung on my next words. Yes, I said, my voice gaining strength. JM is my initials. The algorithm is completely my creation. I spent 3 months developing it, and I have comprehensive documentation to prove it. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear papers rustling and what sounded like keyboard clicks. The email you sent me 3 days ago. I've been reviewing your evidence. The practice video is particularly compelling. Marcus used your exact phrases, your specific examples, even your unique way of explaining complex concepts. It's like watching someone perform a very bad impersonation. I can provide additional proof if needed. Email drafts, file metadata, development notes. Send me everything. Every file, every timestamp, every piece of evidence you have. I want a complete chronological record of your work on this project, going back to day one. I could hear the steel entering her voice, the tone that had earned her a reputation as one of the most formidable CEOs in the fintech industry. There's something else you should know, she continued. I've been in this business for 25 years, and I've developed a pretty good sense for when someone is presenting their own work versus when they're reading from someone else's script. During that quarterly meeting, Marcus was clearly nervous, constantly referring to notes, stumbling over technical explanations that should have been second nature, if he'd actually developed them. My chest filled with a mixture of relief and vindication. Someone in power had noticed what I'd been screaming silently about for days. In contrast, Olivia continued, your practice video shows someone who understands every nuance of their creation, someone who can explain complex concepts without notes because they lived through every breakthrough and setback. That's not something you can fake. I heard more papers shuffling, then her voice became even more focused. I'm calling an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. I want you there, along with Trevor, Marcus, and our legal team. Bring every piece of evidence you have. If what I suspect is true, we have a serious problem that needs immediate resolution. What kind of problem? I asked, though I thought I already knew. Intellectual property theft, fraudulent representation, and potential legal liability if we proceed with patenting stolen work. The kind of problem that can destroy careers and cost companies millions in lawsuits. Her voice was ice-cold now. If someone has been stealing from our employees and passing it off as their own innovation, they're about to discover that I take a very dim view of thieves. The word thieves hung in the air like a verdict. After days of feeling like I was going crazy, like I was fighting ghosts and shadows, someone finally saw the truth I'd been desperately trying to illuminate. Jada, one more thing. Until this meeting, don't discuss this with anyone. Not Trevor, not Marcus, not even your closest colleagues. We're going to handle this by the book, with proper documentation and witnesses. Understood. Good. And Jada? Her voice softened slightly. If your evidence is as comprehensive as it appears to be, then you've been the victim of a serious injustice. But I want you to know that justice isn't just about punishment. It's also about recognition. If this algorithm is truly your creation, then your name should be on it, along with all the credit and compensation that entails. After she hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, staring at my phone and trying to process what had just happened. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe properly. Someone believed me. Someone with power was taking action. But more than that, I realized that my decision to document everything, to save every draft and record every breakthrough, hadn't just been paranoid overthinking. It had been the preparation that would save my career. Tomorrow morning, the truth would finally have its day in court. The boardroom felt different at 9 a.m. sharp the next morning. Gone was the celebratory atmosphere from the quarterly meeting. Instead, tension filled the air like static electricity before a thunderstorm. I arrived early, my laptop bag heavy with printed evidence and backup drives, my heart steady with a calm that comes from knowing you're about to be vindicated. Olivia Grant sat at the head of the table, her expression unreadable, but her posture radiating authority. To her right sat Margaret Walsh from legal, a sharp-eyed woman who looked like she could dissect a contract with her stare alone. Two other executives I didn't recognize flanked them, witnesses, I realized, to whatever was about to unfold. Trevor entered first, his usual confident swagger slightly dimmed. He kept glancing at his phone, probably wondering why this meeting had been called with such urgent secrecy. Marcus followed a few steps behind, his face pale and his hands visibly shaking as he clutched a folder of papers. "Please, everyone take a seat," Olivia said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd made billion-dollar decisions before breakfast. "We're here to discuss some serious concerns that have come to my attention regarding the predictive algorithm presented at our recent quarterly review." Trevor straightened in his chair, putting on his best executive smile. "Of course, Olivia. Marcus and I are happy to answer any questions about the project. It really is groundbreaking work." "I'm sure it is," Olivia replied dryly. She reached for a remote control and dimmed the lights. "Before we begin, I'd like everyone to watch something." The large wall-mounted screen flickered to life, and suddenly my face appeared, standing in my living room 3 weeks ago. My recorded voice filled the room with crystal clarity. The beauty of this approach is how it handles edge cases that traditional models miss. For instance, the algorithm identifies subtle patterns in payment timing that correlate with future default risk in ways that aren't immediately obvious. The timestamp in the corner was unmistakable, 3 weeks before the quarterly meeting, recorded in my apartment, using my words, my explanations, my intellectual voice. Marcus went white as a sheet. Trevor's confident expression cracked like thin ice. "Interesting," Olivia said, pausing the video. "Now, Marcus, could you explain why your presentation used these exact same phrases? Word for word, emphasis for emphasis." Marcus opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked desperately at Trevor, who was staring at the frozen screen like he'd seen a ghost. "I can explain that," Trevor began, but Olivia held up a hand. "Actually, let me continue." She clicked to the next slide on her prepared presentation. "This is a metadata analysis of the original algorithm files, showing creation dates, modification histories, and user access logs. The work began 94 days ago, developed consistently over 3 months, all traced to Jada Monroe's personal and professional accounts." The screen showed a detailed timeline that painted an irrefutable picture of my development process. Every breakthrough, every revision, every late-night session was documented with digital precision. Furthermore, Margaret Walsh interjected, her legal training evident in her methodical delivery, We have email drafts, practice recordings, and personal notes that establish Ms. Monroe as the clear originator of this intellectual property. The evidence is not just compelling, it's overwhelming. Trevor finally found his voice. There must be some mistake. Marcus developed this algorithm independently. If there are similarities to Jada's work, it's purely coincidental. Coincidental? Olivia's voice cut through the boardroom like a blade. Let me show you something else. She clicked to another slide, displaying the document Marcus had accidentally printed. My original presentation with his name slapped on the cover, but my digital fingerprints embedded throughout. This document, found in our printer queue yesterday, shows clear evidence of file conversion. Someone took Jada's original presentation, changed the author name, adjusted the formatting, but forgot to remove the underlying metadata that proves its true origin. Marcus looked like he might be sick. I can explain. Please do, Olivia said coldly. Jada shared some insights with me weeks ago. I thought I could build on her ideas and make them my own. I didn't realize how much I'd borrowed until you stole an entire algorithm and presented it as your original work, Margaret finished. Mr. Rivera, what you're describing is intellectual property theft, which carries serious legal and professional consequences. Trevor tried one last desperate play. Surely we can work this out internally. Marcus made an error in judgment, but the work was done under company time and resources. Actually, Olivia interrupted, her voice now carrying the finality of a judge's gavel. The work was done primarily on Jada's personal time, using her personal resources, based on her original insights and methodologies. According to our employee handbook and her contract, she retains significant rights to her intellectual property. She turned to face me directly. Jada, this algorithm should have had your name from the beginning. It will now. The words I dreamed of hearing for months finally filled the room. But Olivia wasn't finished. Effective immediately, Marcus Rivera's employment is terminated for intellectual property theft and fraudulent representation. Trevor Blackstone is suspended pending a full investigation into his role in this incident and his management practices. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus gathered his things with shaking hands, not meeting anyone's eyes. Trevor sat frozen, his career imploding in real time. Jada, Olivia continued, you'll be taking over as acting head of data analytics, effective today. Your algorithm will be properly credited, patented under your name, and you'll receive full recognition and compensation for your innovation. As the meeting disbanded and the guilty parties filed out like defeated soldiers, Olivia approached me with something I'd never seen from her before, a genuine smile. You fought for your work when others would have given up, she said. That's exactly the kind of determination we need leading our analytics team. By the end of that week, my name was engraved on a patent application, my salary had increased by 40%, and my algorithm was being implemented company-wide. The ghost file had come alive, and with it, my faith that truth could still triumph over theft. Sometimes justice doesn't just happen, sometimes you have to document it, fight for it, and refuse to let it be buried. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting everything you deserved in the first place.